and welcome to Art Pop Talk. I'm Gianna.
And I'm Bianca.
How you doing, Bianca?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing really good. Do you know why?
Is it because this is the 10th episode of Art Pop Talk?
It is, in fact, because it is the 10th episode of APT.
Wow. Ooh, APT.
I know, we're very official over here.
Getting into the acronyms now, huh?
APT headquarters.
APTHQ?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
That sounds official.
My bedroom is APTHQ for now.
So
Hopefully,
good.
We're going to get like a really cool studio sometime soon.
Oh, of course. This is only temporary.
Truly.
Oh my goodness. Well, what else has been going on?
Just hanging out. I trimmed Ollivander's nails.
That is really exciting.
It was really exciting. They're really long. I feel like we should also talk about Ollivander a little bit because we did do a TikTok with him.
We did do a TikTok with Ollivander. I'm very surprised that we haven't talked about him more yet on the show. I'm surprised. I feel like you work him into a lot of conversations, so I'm surprised that it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, well, here we go. You asked me how I was doing, and
I want to know.
Well, I have a snowshoe cat. His name is Ollivander, and there's a really long story that goes into, I guess, how I got him and how he got his name, but we don't have to go into it today, but maybe we can do it on the episode we do with Alyssa, because we want to do an episode about animals and pets in portraiture and art. So we wanted to have my best friend, Dr. Elizabeth Green, veterinarian, on. So we can talk about Ollivander some more then. But he was being so cute this week, and we did a TikTok with him. I did my first TikTok with Ollivander. And ever since the last episode on Chromatica, I keep calling him Chromcatica.
Chromcatica.
And
I think I added an extra T.
Chromcatica. So I really like calling him Chromcatica.
He's such a little dear. He's honestly really cute.
I know. Okay, here's the thing about Ollivander is everyone says he's so handsome every time he goes to the vet. The vet always says he's such a handsome boy, and he's a precious angel. I want all of you.
A little weight at the vet.
Okay, so I had to take him to the vet because he scratched his eyeball on something, and the thing about Ollivander is that he's not a normal cat, right? He's very special, very active. He's not like one of those cats that sleeps around all day.
No, that is...
He really likes to be involved in your life. But he scratched his eye, so I had to take him into the vet. And it was really sad because, well, it was good, but, they came and got him out of the car, and I didn't get to go into the vet office with him. So then, where was I going with this?
He said,
he
gained a half a pound.
Oh, yeah, that's...
You just completely zone out when you talk about him. You just were forgetting where you were going.
He's so handsome, I forgot what I was supposed to be talking about. He had his eyeball in the car, and it was so much.
I'm done.
So... He gained... Everyone says he's really handsome, but this time the vet came out and he said, okay, so Ollivander's gained half a pound, but he still looked like a very good boy. So I just gotta, make sure we're...
Well, maybe also, maybe he's just, like, stress eating, as we all are. Like, maybe, like, once he gets back into, like, his own space and his own house, like, he'll just, like, mellow out and then, like...
It has been a lot because I had to drag him to Pennsylvania with me, and then we had to come all the way back, and my mom has a cat here, too, so...
Yeah.
But anyway, that's what I've been doing. I've been playing with Ollivander.
Maybe he just
Mr. Chromcatica.
Maybe he just needs to listen to Chromatica, and that will help calm him down.
Oh, we do. I mean,
okay,
we listen to it all the time together.
Fabulous.
Right before we go to bed, cuddling, and
of course,
it makes him really happy. So it's healing his eyeball.
Where was I going with this?
I'm sorry. We also wanted to give a shout out to some of our friends who have been listening to Art Pop Talk, Sammy and the Haleys. Thank you so much. We were talking with them, what, a week or two ago now?
Yeah, like a week ago.
And they were being so sweet, just saying how much they love Art Pop Talk. And we love you guys.
We do love you guys.
Hey, babes. So, Gianna, what's up with you?
Not too much this week. Been applying for a couple jobs.
Nice.
Kind of getting back in the routine of that a little bit. We did do some really cool stuff for our Pop Talk this week that we can't wait to share with you guys.
I know we had a business meeting today, and I love when we get to have business meetings.
I'm a businesswoman.
I'm a businesswoman.
Yeah, so I feel like exciting things, but can't like talk about it yet. You know?
I know. So if we can't talk about it, what are we going to talk about today? Should we have a lot to talk about.
Yes, we definitely do. Our script today just kind of like burnt me out.
I know, it was so hard because I just kept going down all these holes, and as I was writing, I'd be like, oh, you know what? We should talk about this thing, or we should talk about this thing. And then I started thinking about classes in school, and I was like, oh my gosh, I miss school so much.
That's what happens with us. And I feel like that's why we need to do the show together, because we hold each other accountable, because we get so excited about something and we just spiral off into one direction, and then we need to like come back and stick to the script, you know what I mean, or stick to our plan. But it all worked out, but we just get really excited about things. And
I know.
I'm a person that puts all the information out on a page and then narrows it down from there. So I do there, you can never do too much research, but I feel like I always do, I don't know, I always go a little bit bigger than I should sometimes.
But then it gets like painful when you can't talk about everything you wanted to talk about.
Which is exactly where I'm at.
Right, yeah.
So we have a lot of great topics and artists for today's discussion, but as usual, we have some more relevant art news to share with the class today. When you listen to our episode, we know you can't help but jam out to our intro music because, let's be real, it's a total bop.
Total bop.
Total bop. But that song was composed by our brother-in-law, an extremely talented, musically diverse educator and musician, Josh Turner. No, not Josh Turner, that country artist. Y'all know who I'm talking about? But lock the door and turn the lights down low.
Not him. That's not our brother-in-law.
Of course, we are talking about the lead screamer and bassist for the band Discordia, Josh Turner.
Right.
Obviously.
Do not get the two confused.
Oh my god. But honestly, though, Josh is wonderful. He's a great resource for us in having conversations and bridging the gap between the visual world and the musical world. We're really fortunate to have him, and not only has Josh written some new tunes for Art Pop Talk, but he has actually also written a marimba solo piece about the Black Lives Matter protest entitled Say His Name. This piece was written to bring awareness and for fundraising purposes. So we wanted to share this piece with you all today, and in sharing this post on Facebook, Josh wrote, I created this marimba solo inspired by the international outrage at the senseless murder of George Floyd. More accurately, this solo reflects a turmoil that we must treat as a tipping point in our history. The outrage and protests throughout the world aren't the result of this isolated incident, but an explosion of emotion that has been collectively held back for literal centuries as we have continuously mistreated and oppressed the Black community. So if you would like to purchase this song, every cent earned will be donated to the Black Vision Collective, which is a nonprofit organization for Black liberation in Minnesota. The link to listen is on Josh's Instagram and YouTube channel, Josh Turner. And we just wanted to share that with you today. It's a great piece, and we really appreciate this fundraising effort on Josh's behalf. So
yeah, totally. I'm excited for you guys to hear it. It'll be really good.
Yeah. Some more news. If you have been sleeping on the new song called March March, please just do yourself a favor. Pause our podcast and go listen to the latest song by the band formerly known as the Dixie Chicks, now known as the Chicks. So this song and music video, please watch the video, are extremely powerful because the visuals flash over images of current historical protests all the way from the Women's Rights March to Gay Rights March, environmental causes, and of course the Black Lives Matter movement. The band, as far as I know, hasn't made any other statement in regards to this new song other than we want to meet this moment. And I just want to give the chicks the respect they deserve because they have been through a lot in their career. And I'm very here for them being back.
Yeah, I love the direction that this new album is going. The aesthetics of it, too, are just everything.
Yeah.
And I think it comes out at the end of July, so that should be really exciting to hear the full thing. But the music video for Gaslighter was really good too. But I feel really just, I don't know, proud of them. I really truly don't know much about the chicks. I feel like I am one of those people who has kind of known who they are and knows some of their songs, but really hasn't been paying attention to what they do.
I was sleeping on
the chicks, and now I'm wide awake.
Yep. I'm so here for it. They're doing great things. I'm really excited, for the whole album.
Gaslighter, when that song came out, it's the perfect amount of time from my apartment to work because I get to walk to work every day. So when that song came out for 2 weeks, I was just walking to work with Gaslighter.
Ooh.
And it made me feel so good.
Yeah,
I was just walking down the street,
get you all ready, feisty for the day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was really good. Speaking of PA, wow, I live there. I'm supposed to be living there.
Do you?
I don't know. So I have this amazing colleague and friend back in PA. Her name is Kathy. She has been so incredible in welcoming me to Pennsylvania. And let me just tell you, Kathy is the wokest babe I know. She has been telling me about how she's been listening to the podcast. So hi, Kathy. And we've been talking a lot lately about the Black Lives Matter movement and what we can do at work, on the podcast, and throughout our daily lives, and in these kind of different platforms that we have access to. Kathy is an artist, she's a writer, and she was telling me how she was inspired by this New York Times article on the names of people who have died from the coronavirus. And she decided to make a visual poem of the names of Black people who have been murdered in acts of white violence. We posted this on our Instagram last week. So she did a lot of research looking at murder reports to find statements from friends and family members about the victims. And I think even seeing the names physically listed before you has such a huge impact. That's also part of the power of the Chicks music video. If you watch it, there is this list of names at the end of the video that just keeps getting faster and faster and faster. So when you see the lists, these deaths, I think, become less abstracted and more tangible. And I just want to thank Kathy for sharing that with us. And I think this helps us all to consider how we can be an ally in these movements and use whatever our hobbies, talents, lines of work are to make change and really think critically about how you can move progressively forward.
Yeah. Well, Kathy sounds like a queen. So I'm really happy that you have her.
No, I love her so much, and I'm really excited. I hope I can go back to work soon just so we can hang out, because I didn't really get to, I guess, a month or two.
Yeah, I mean, you really weren't there that long.
Yeah, I know. So I'm excited to get to know everybody a little bit better.
Yeah, and we shared images of Kathy's work on our Instagram, so if you haven't seen them, they're up now.
Yes.
So some really great art news. I think we're ready to pop into this week's topic.
Wow. Did you like those new bubble sounds?
They're so cute.
Courtesy of Josh Turner. I feel like now we're just going to get a bunch of Josh Turner, the country music spam, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Wouldn't that be great?
Go follow Discordia. That's what you should do.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you all saw this episode coming, as it is June, so... Drumroll, please, Bianca.
That was horrible. don't know how to do a drum roll. I don't want to bang on the mic because they'll get a bunch of static in their ear.
Okay, well. All right.
I know, I'm not a drummer. I'm sorry.
Happy freaking Pride Month, everyone. Today, Bianca and I are really excited to talk about some groundbreaking and well-known artists that address gender, identity, and other social constructs through portraiture, and especially some contemporary queer artists that I have worked with whose work addresses untold queer histories and their work strives to uncover them. But before we talk about the art, Bianca and I first wanted to speak to our relationship with working with queer art and artists in a museum setting, and then talk about the history of Pride, of course.
Wow. Happy Pride, everybody. And, you're listening to this probably on the last day of June, but Pride is all year round. So,
absolutely.
But I'm so excited to talk about it today. I love seeing everyone going out to Pride. Pride is not canceled. No way. I was just talking with a friend from Milwaukee, and we were interning together at the same company, and we went to Milwaukee Pride together, and it was just so fun. And I kept getting like flashbacks on my Snapchat story. And we saw JoJo perform. We went to a drag show.
Love JoJo.
Oh my gosh, it was so fun. It was so fun, and everyone was so nice. I'm just gonna cry thinking about it. But Sammy, another Sammy, hey girl, I miss you. I also got to lead a tour during Pride Month at Northwestern Mutual. So
cool.
That was a really cool company because they had a group for LGBTQIA plus employees and allies. So during the week we could go to these meetings, and then because I was working the art internship side of it, I got to lead a tour of all the art we have on view and talk about queer theory and queer art, gay and lesbian artists. So it was really fun.
Yay, that's great. Milwaukee was fun.
Milwaukee's so fun. If you can, go visit Milwaukee. It's really cool.
Yeah, I had fun there. I was only there for 3 days?
Yeah.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah.
Well, I first wanted to talk about an annual event that I had the absolute pleasure of helping to coordinate at the OSUMA, and this was called Queering the Museum. This event was put on in conjunction with OSU's Pride Week and also the local Pride organization, Payne County Pride, where throughout the day we had a multitude of inclusive, hands-on activities, crafting, or even physical activities, and of course conversational opportunities through tours and lectures. So to just name a few activities, we had things like body positivity yoga. We had student-led presentations where they talked about their thesis in which they themselves were addressing queer theories and history. We led tours in our gallery using LGBTQ plus dialogue. We made identity flags in our art lab, and we had film showings, documentary screenings highlighting queer history and women's history. And that is just to name a few. An incredible annual event that I looked forward to. Playing just a small part in it every year was really great.
Yeah, I was going to say one of my favorite Queering the Museum activities was the label covering. Mm-hmm. So throughout the museum, all of the wall text and object labels were covered, and we encouraged people to write their own labels for different artworks, and it was so awesome.
Yeah, this event was something I look forward to helping with every year. It was so wonderful to see the community of Stillwater come together and practice advocacy, have drag shows at local bars. And when I first moved to Stillwater, I wasn't sure if events like this would exist in this kind of environment, and I'm really happy to say that they do, and I'm really happy to have played a small part in making them happen. I also have some great resources we made about allyship, how do you ally, and I am going to put images of those on our resources page because I just really like them.
Yeah. That makes me so happy thinking about Queering the Museum. And Stillwater has some fantastic community members, student groups, and OSU has fantastic people like Irissa Baxter and the people in the Gender Women Studies department who are doing the best work. So if you're in Oklahoma or you're in Stillwater, make sure you're tapping into those spaces and hanging out with some freaking cool people.
Yeah. The Multicultural Affairs Office just as a whole is
awesome.
Just amazing.
Fantastic. So in thinking about spaces like the OSUMA and how museums function, we continually have to evolve and talk about art from a queer perspective. And I think it's important to give some history to the kind of art historical scholarship behind that, going back to that idea of labels and what we've talked about, this before, but words matter. And no doubt that our education on a topic, our theories, our constructions and ideas will evolve and change. That's kind of inevitable. And with that also comes our verbiage and language too. So not only do we have art and artists thinking about this and looking at queer identity within their artwork, but we also have gender and sexualities theories evolving, as well as specifically art historical ideas utilizing that queer theory as well. Mm-hmm. It's important to say that gender, sexuality, and queer studies are different from feminist theory. Although intersectionality seeks to include all voices within a feminist framework, these ideas are different. Originally referred to as gay and lesbian studies, these theories began to develop in the 1970s in response to the feminist movement, as well as the 1969 Stonewall Rebellion, a very important event where a multiracial group of drag queens, transgender, gay, and lesbian peoples fought back against a police raid in Lower Manhattan. Queer theory emerged out of gay and lesbian studies, as well as the AIDS epidemic, which called for a radical new approach to political, social, and academic ideas of gender construction and gender oppression. I wish we had time to dive into all the incredible scholarship on queer theory, and I do have a side note really quick. I just need to say that if you have the opportunity to take a class on masculinities, oh my God, do it. Do it. If you see men and masculinities on your roster, sign up for that class. If you are looking for more on masculinities, please hit me up and let's chat about it because it's mind-blowing. Megan Burke is the most incredible professor I've ever had. I took Men and Masculinities with her. Please go look at her research. We'll link it on our resources page. She's a philosopher and social theorist. It hurts that we can't talk about every single incredible theory and scholar today, but I just wanted to bring up a few key names in queer theory's development to kind of get us started and to get you looking into those resources as well. I'm going to start with Eve Kosofsky-Sedgwick. They define queerness as the open mesh of possibilities, gaps, overlaps, dissonances, and resonances, lapses and excesses of meaning when the constituent elements of anyone's gender, of anyone's sexuality aren't made or can't be made to signify monolithically. Then we also have Judith Butler, who develops this important idea on gender performance. She argues that gender is performative, that there is no natural, true, or innate essence to gender or any other type of identity. For Butler, identity is performatively constituted by the very expressions that are said to be its results. Now, there's a super important concept, this idea of gender performativity, but I think interestingly, there's been some backlash against that. So again, look at Dr. Megan Burke's work. I had a colleague in grad school think about this essence of being, and Dr. Burke relies on concepts of being from Simone de Beauvoir and thinking about this existence. So I think to a certain extent, while gender is performative, there's some backlash against that idea that there's no essence to it at all. So in the art historical vein, just as we have feminist art history, we also have queer art history. And within our art historical academia, we have people using these pivotal queer theories like Butler, like Eve Sedgwick, using that to think about art, visual culture, identity, and different museum cultures.
Yeah. God, I miss studying queer theory so much. I feel like that's why putting together this script just fueled my soul a little bit. I felt like getting back into this routine and oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and it's so, it grows so much so quickly, and it feels one of those moments when you realize you can never read enough, you can never gather enough information, enough perspectives.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Going back to talking about museum involvements with Pride and talking about queer art in a museum context, Bianca and I have been talking a lot about museums' responses and involvement in regards to the Black Lives Matter movement. And it makes complete sense to us that museums would address this moment in history, as art is an incredible social tool to artists. I can't argue that any other way.
Right.
Otherwise, why are we doing this? Why are we even making this stuff, right? As artists, we have to trust that museums and galleries are housing our works appropriately, displaying our works appropriately, and educating the community they serve about both historical works and talk about them in relation to our contemporary works in order to make for an important discussion and make for a greater difference in this world. And whether this impact resonates with just one person or its entire community, no act of positive and necessary change is too small. We talk a lot on this podcast about the power and significance of museum institutions, and we have both been taught as employees how museums navigate and handle and view their position in the art world and in their community. And I think it's good to preface that not every institution is the same, meaning museums have different needs and different goals, and the way these institutions view their impact are arguably not going to be identical to how others operate. But as it is Pride Month and we have these necessary protests happening around the country, I was telling Bianca how I was really struggling with these statements museums were putting out while combating these ideas I have about how museums can operate and how they have operated. For example, when putting on events like Queering the Museum or other special LGBTQ plus events, whenever throughout the year, we would have people call or criticize the events to let us know they didn't support what we were doing. And in having these discussions and learning from people in the industry on how to navigate and respond to these situations, we would say something along the lines of, well, as a cultural destination in this community, it is our job to cater to all the different needs of our diverse community members. And if this event doesn't fulfill any of your needs, skip this one, and we are happy to have you for another event, our next event. And although I do think that this is a good response on how to deal with, crazy people 101, it was presented to me in a way that meant it's our job to support the needs of our community and listen to them, but it's not our job to take a stand. And at this time, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, because in learning these things in an academic environment, it is also really easy to get caught up in what you're doing and what your goals are at that moment and the goals of the institution that I'm serving. But now that I'm not caught up in it and I can take a step back, my thought process feels a bit more free. And having created my own platform to think about the role that art plays, to think about the role I did play as a museum educator, and think about just as a human being, a community member that relies heavily on the impact that museums make, and a person who is an ally and is devastated over the constant oppression and racism in this country, I don't agree with that, especially in times when change and activism is absolutely necessary. It is absolutely arts institutions' jobs to take a stand and to set an example.
Yeah, I 1000% agree with you. I think, one, it's frustrating when you feel like you are in a place where you can't speak out against your superiors in a place of work and you're told to do one thing and go through with it. But I think it's frustrating to see when you have so many brands, companies, organizations putting this kind of fake or commercialized pride and Black Lives Matter commentary forward. So how do you recognize genuine allyship what makes you a genuine ally? And how do you do that constantly and without question, not just during Pride Month and not just during these protests we're seeing? And I think that a place where museums and the art world can do so much good is in moments like these. And yes, the art world, like anything else, is, you know, commercialized. It's funded by donors. It's funded by things sometimes we can't change and we have to comply with. But I do think that museums, galleries, art collectors do have this ability to seek and praise honesty in being genuine. So it's frustrating as an educational institution to see a museum not take a stand or make a thoughtful statement for what is right. Human rights and love are not a trend. I get so frustrated when people in the art world use this as a trend. And museums, you know, and the art world is run by people. Museums and art history function as a product of human intellect and interaction. So us as people need to do the right thing and talk about this stuff without fear of disappointing people who are coming into that space. If someone doesn't agree with the program that you're putting on, I hope that they will come into the museum. I hope we can have a discussion about that. But you do need to take a stand and say, we are doing this because it's freaking Pride, and we have pride in all of our community members and everyone who walks into this building. And so it should be a learning environment. I hope it does become a learning environment for people who feel hateful ways about programming. And it should be a place to cultivate love and progress.
Right. So I just feel like if you are going to take a stand on something, why wouldn't you take a stand on that? And in my opinion as well, having events, having queer events, having queer exhibitions, isn't that telling? Isn't that showing that you are standing with that community? So I guess my thing is, why are we not being more verbal about it? Why are we not being more vocal about it? And that's what I am calling upon museums to do.
Yeah. So in thinking about that, let's talk about some history of Pride, shall we?
I would love to. So, on June 28th, 1969, 8 officers from the New York City's Public Morals Division, part of a police unit, raided the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in New York City's Greenwich Village. At the time, raids like this were, of course, not unusual because homosexuality was illegal. But the reason why the Stonewall riots were a pivotal moment in queer history was because people fought back and the community joined this fight, and hundreds of people were able to resist arrest. What also makes Stonewall so significant was the coverage it received, and once the word got out about the riots, thousands returned the next night to continue the protest, and it lasted a total of 6 days. Stonewall is a pivotal moment in queer activism and fighting discrimination, and we should learn about it. But I'm also betting that it was also the only, if any, part of queer history you were taught in school, or one of the only things about queer history you maybe remember. And I'm also betting your educators were not using the word queer and didn't give you the full story behind Stonewall, because as of recent, many of us were even unaware of the significance that Black trans women and trans women of color made at the time. So Bianca mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I just wanted to give some insight into this word, because a lot of people are either unfamiliar or uncomfortable with using this identifier because of its history. So let's just talk about it. So yes, the word queer has very long history, first used to describe situations or people that others thought were perhaps odd or strange, then used to target particularly men who were not the epitome of masculinity, whatever that means.
Truly.
Beginning in the late 1980s, the word queer began to be reclaimed and used as a neutral or positive self-identifier by the LGBT people. An early example of this usage by the LGBT community was by an organization called Queer Nation, formed by AIDS advocates, where in 1990, at a Pride Parade in New York, they circulated anonymous flyers titled "Queers Read This," which included a passage explaining their adaptation of the label queer. in which they state, do we really have to use that word? It's trouble. Every gay person has his or her own take on it. For some, it means strange, eccentric, and kind of mysterious. And for others, queer conjures up those awful memories of adolescent suffering. Well, yes, gay is great. It has its place. But when a lot of lesbians and gay men wake up in the morning, we feel angry and disgusted, not gay. So we've chosen to call ourselves queer. Using queer is a way of remembering us how we are perceived by the rest of the world.
I think, again, going back to how a queer lens in academia has evolved, language is so, so important to inclusivity and equality. And in some cases, I think in a contemporary context, it's okay to mess up as long as you're not being intentionally malicious or ignorant. Feminist and queer verbiage does change frequently, and that's okay. But the point is, you have to be understanding. As an ally, you need to be flexible. And again, you may feel uncomfortable in unlearning something, but you just have to. So if you were taught that queer was a negative word, but someone asks you to call them queer, not gay, you just have to accept that, apologize. I think if someone corrects you about their pronouns, again, your usage of a word, have a conversation about it, accept it, and start using it correctly, or not at all if that's what someone asks of you. So again, just as an ally, verbiage and language is so, so important.
And I think what you said too, like asking is key. Like if you don't know, it's also okay to ask.
Yes, do not be afraid to ask.
Absolutely. So we can't talk about this moment in history, Stonewall, without addressing our current history, the current Black Lives Matter movement, and this year's Pride. Trans women of color led the uprising at Stonewall 51 years ago, and yet they are not being put at the center in the heart of their own story. And the movement that they've helped to start has also not fully credited and acknowledged them. The same can be said since the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement, where trans visibility has not been prioritized, on top of, again, them not being able to fully benefit from both movements, which were created to not only combat racism and homophobia, but also transphobia. It's extremely important to address this year's Pride in conjunction with the Black Lives Matter movement, because we are starting to see these two movements band together, which is wonderful because this is how intersectional ideas should be taking form through inclusive social action.
Yeah, I just feel so much joy in seeing the things that are taking place before us. Like this type of movement, man, like that's what it's about.
Totally.
And of course, I think we are saddened that we have to continually stand up for basic human rights and equality and anti-racism. But I'm so overcome by the sense of togetherness that we're seeing from both Pride and Black Lives Matter throughout this whole month. We are so much more connected than we are different, and I'm happy to see all of these communities fighting hate, discrimination, racism, transphobia, homophobia together. And also making time to celebrate one another. Pride is a celebration, and I'll say it again, Pride has not been canceled this year. And you know what? We freaking love to see it, babes. So we are going to talk about some cool art now. But I also wanted to mention, as we move forward in thinking about artworks, we are going to use terms like masculine and feminine with the understanding that these are non-existent and constructed terms, but we're going to use them to talk about the ways in which artists are challenging those constructions. So,
all right, we are going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some amazing artwork. Welcome back, everybody. Bianca.
Why are you laughing?
I don't know. You ready to get into some lesbian content?
Oh my god. Yes, 1000% yes. I'm always ready to get into some lesbian content. Again, you've got to check out Hannah Gadsby.
I know, if you don't know what we're talking about at this point, like, what are you guys doing?
But cubism.
But cubism. All right, well, the first artist up for today is Gluck, born Hannah Gluckstein. Gluck was gender nonconforming and known for breaking gender stereotypes when it not only came to their personal stylization or appearance, but also through their portraits and metaphorical portraits about their relationship or affairs with women. Gluck was born into a wealthy Jewish family in London where their family owned a catering company. In 1913, they attended the Johns Wood School of Arts, and around 5 years later, they fled to an arts community in Lamorna, a different village in England, with another art friend. It was during their time in Lamorna where Gluck began to adopt a more masculine appearance and started to defy fashion and gender norms and insisted on being known and addressed as Gluck and excluded any kind of prefix to their name. Moving forward to around the mid-1930s, they became known for making portraits and floral paintings and didn't really fit in or wasn't affiliated with other artistic movements at the time, mostly because they only exhibited their work in solo exhibitions. So to clarify, when we look at movements, categorizing artists can start by looking at which academy they went to, where did they train, what artists were there, what groups showed together, what kind of exhibitions did they put on together.
Yeah.
But again, Gluck breaks this tradition, and it's probably not a coincidence they wanted to separate themselves from other post-war British artists at the time.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So diving into the work itself, I wanted to talk about one of their most well-known paintings called Medallion, often referred to as You, We, which is a dual portrait of Gluck and their lover Nesta Obermer, which was inspired by a night in 1936 when they attended the opera together, which is really cute.
Sweet.
According to Gluck's biographer, Diana Swami, they sat together in the third row and felt the intensity of the music fuse them both into one person and match their love. I can't. So
Oh my
cute.
god.
Both figures are dressed in suits. Nesta, who's on the left of the portrait, is spotlighted in a more glowing light or atmosphere as she gazes hopefully into the future, whereas Gluck is on the right and is on our level and looks more concerned. They're frowning, and something seems to actually catch their gaze. They seem anxious, possibly about an unaccepted future, perhaps. We as viewers see both their profiles standing side by side as well, so they're not looking at us straight on, they are gazing off to the left in this portrait. Of course, this painting and Gluck's work as a whole wasn't discussed in these terms at the time. It's also crazy to think that this piece is looked as of now as this marker of lesbian love, right? But at the time of its creation, there was no acceptable vocabulary for even being a lesbian or a transgender person, a non-conforming person, which is why it is pretty incredible that Gluck was able to strip away the gendered aspects of their name and identity. So pretty incredible.
Yeah, the paintings that they have are really, really beautiful, and I love learning about portraiture, and I actually hadn't learned about them in any of my art history classes. I think I saw their work on Instagram for the first time.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about them either, but I like learning new things, so yay.
I know. So thinking about portraiture and identity, hopefully this is a name you're excited to learn about or maybe have learned about in an art history class. Claude Cahun. Claude was born Lucy Schwab in 1894. They were a French photographer, sculptor, and writer. Schwab adopted the gender-ambiguous name Claude Cahun in 1917. Claude is a name in French that can be both masculine and feminine, and is best known for self-portraits in which they assume a variety of persona. Working in Paris in the 1920s and 30s alongside surrealist artists and writers, before the development of queer theory within art history, obviously. Cahun created stark, sometimes playful, but deliberately equivocal photos of themselves. Preferably, their most well-known body of work are their photographic portraits. However, they were not necessarily intending to actually put this body of work out into the world. Although it's something that we study now, Cahun maybe didn't consider themselves not a practicing artist, but was not intending to kind of make a living or make money off of this body of work. Many of their images play with that idea of duality, where we see Claude posing in a mirror and looking to the viewer, or we see two of their faces looking at one another in almost a kind of ghostly or uncanny manner. We also see them playing with clothing and makeup, with costume throughout this body of photography. Cahun's work is both political and personal, and often is undermines traditional concepts of those static gender roles. In their autobiography called Disavowals, they explained, quote, masculine, feminine, it depends on the situation. Neuter is the only gender that always suits me, end quote. So I think this is kind of what's most interesting about Cahun is the way they were working in the 1920s and 30s. They died in 1954 at age 60. But we really actually see their work more situated within feminist and queer work of the 90s when this scholarship was coming to light and was being more explored in art history. I was reading this New York Times article, and it says, in the 1990s, however, they received a rush of attention as gender issues were gathering steam around the world. Then Vince Aletti, a New York photography critic and curator, said, suddenly they seemed incredibly of the moment. And while I do think this is interesting to compare and contrast these images of Cahun's work with people like feminist artists Cindy Sherman and Catherine Opie, who are looking at identity, portraiture, and photography, I do think it's important to acknowledge Cahun in their moment. They also did a lot of activist work with their partner, and I think it matters to also consider an artist during their time. What did LGBTQIA plus art look like and ideas look like during that time? Just because academia starts to consider something in the 90s doesn't mean it hasn't existed for all of time. And I think about Claude, it kind of matters for both contexts. Like, I think it's totally fine to consider her now again, but I don't want to ignore the space that she was working in during the 20s and 30s. So then in the same article, David J. Guesty, a professor at the Institute in Chicago, who specializes in gender and sexuality in art, is quoted. He says, in Cahun, you've got an artist who turns the camera on themselves to see who they can become. Isn't that what we're all doing now with cell phone photos? This is one reason young people might see themselves in Cahun. And I don't know, Gianna, I kind of wanted to talk to you about this because I felt kind of weird. I don't know, this quote, like, I understand what the professor is trying to say, but I also want Cahun to resonate because of her work in the moment. And I want to talk about the construction of gender and identity and how they're playing with that. And I just felt like saying young people might resonate with this because of selfies was kind of like a cheap shot in a way. Obviously, people can resonate with her work no matter their gender, sexuality, age, identity, whatever. That's what art does. It allows you to form those connections. And I also think the idea of a selfie is so much more complex than being related to Cahun's play on gender and deconstruction of the binary. And I think that selfies and portraiture are such a great way to play with identity, and I'm not discounting the role that they have within society and how we can analyze queer theory through this idea of the selfie, but I don't know. I just want Claude Cahun to exist, not without the selfie, but you know, she has such an also greater body of work than these pictures in a mirror, right? And playing with identity also exists beyond that. And I think, you know, we could think about maybe Judith Butler in that way. How do you perform identity all the time, not just when you're performing it with someone else, I guess?
Yeah, I feel like this was a weird one, a weird statement for this professor to say.
Yeah, and it's not because, like, I get the point. You know what I mean? I get what you're saying.
And I get what you're saying.
Oh.
I think in agreeing with you, Bianca, that we love it when we can consider historical works of art in a contemporary context, because as our history evolves and grows, the meaning of that piece can take shape with us.
Yes.
And so that's great. So I do understand it in that context, but I also really, really understand needing to share with people a more comprehensive breadth of her work, and understanding that her constructing visually and expressing her identity and gender is a lot more complex than what we are used to doing today. Not to say that gender and identity and self-expression today isn't complex, but when thinking about the selfie, these things, for the better, have become more accepted, and it's something that we are more prone to doing. But to take that image, to set it up, to wear the outfit, to make that facial expression, to capture that one moment, it's also about the process of photography too.
Yeah, I think that word young people, or that phrase young people, as if old people or older people don't play with their identity.
Which is so dumb and so interesting, because it is really interesting to consider Cahun's work in relationship with Cindy Sherman. Yeah. And I do understand why they do that. And actually I can remember in my art history classes talking about them and then going into like Cindy Sherman, because the lines between like feminist art and queer art have a tendency, I think, to kind of get just like blended up together.
And conflated in class.
Yeah. So for Cindy Sherman, I mean, she is a woman she's way into her career, and to see now Cindy evolve and use Instagram and face filters in different ways as an established woman in her field, you know what I mean? Like, it's different. So like, she's not this millennial young person just like taking selfies, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So I think the idea of the selfie is complex, but I think it's complex in a different way to maybe it's not so fair to compare the two.
Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted a little bit more, you know, rather than just simplifying Cahun's work to a selfie, because it is so much about finding your identity and confronting the constructions that society has placed on us.
And I think credit where credit is due. Like, you're acknowledging the artist that was groundbreaking in doing that, and like, that's not to be overlooked at the same time. So in this article, did this professor say anything else after this, or did he just like drop this quote and move on?
Well, he didn't write the article, but it was just pulled. So I'll do some more digging and update you guys, and maybe learn a little bit more about this professor. But I just thought it was a weird thing to drop in the article, and I think I'm just getting hung up on that word, or on that phrase, young people. So I just wanted to see kind of what you thought about it, if I was being weird in my overreaction to it.
No, and like, I think I'm still thinking about it in my head, but you're not wrong. I think it's odd. I also we talk about it all the time. I hate like generational bullshit, and like, technology is accessible to all people now, and I don't know, it just seems odd.
But I agree.
Okay, well, want to talk about some contemporary art?
I do, always.
Yay. So I wanted to talk about the ongoing installation and project by the artists Nick Vaughn and Jake Margolin. This project is called 50 States. 50 States is a developing or ongoing installation in which the artists explore the connections between LGBTQ histories and contemporary queer experiences in the United States. So Nick and Jake are Houston-based interdisciplinary artists and a married couple. They are dedicated to telling untold histories and stories that predate 1969, so that predate Stonewall in all 50 states through their interactive and experiential installations. These multidisciplinary artists begin each of their projects with such extensive research, site-specific research, and artistic practices, and they not only engage but collaborate with the local LGBTQ community in conjunction with the landscape that they are addressing. And I also wanted to go back really quick and address them predating the Stonewall riots because, as I mentioned earlier, in school, we are taught about LGBTQ history starting at the Stonewall riots.
Right.
And so they are really trying to shed light on the fact that, hey, queer communities existed before.
For all time. For all time.
All time. Like, even if, and the extraordinary thing is, like, especially since we couldn't develop a vocabulary for this.
Right.
Like, we were still here. So,
yeah.
Just wanted to put an emphasis on that. But I had the pleasure to learn from and engage with these artists at the OSUMA as they had a 50 states installation in 2019, highlighting 4 states, which were Oklahoma, Colorado, Texas, and Wyoming. These 2 amazing humans probably just remember me as the museum girl that cries at everything they say, which is true. The first time I really met them, they were taking the staff through the space and I just lost it. Like, I just really completely lost it. I became incredibly overwhelmed with everything I was meant to absorb because for me, their work is everything I crave within art. It's inclusive, it's experiential, but also it's meant to have this greater impact.
Yeah.
And they're just amazing.
I know.
So, yikes. So I'm going to talk about the installation of the state Texas, but I wanted to, the best of my ability, first lay out the gallery space for you all so you have an idea of the kind of environment they are creating. Kind of hard to, verbally explain installation work.
Because you're essentially walking through each state.
Exactly. So each state is in a separated space. They are separated out by designated walls, essentially. So other states don't interfere with your ability to understand what is being communicated to you in that space in the moment. Because each state presents its information to you through different materials as well, such as video footage, playing and using light to form a space, using ephemeral materials, and many, many more. But as you are walking through the space, you realize that there are visuals placed strategically to create continuity, and there is consistency in the themes and the perspectives in which these personal stories and larger histories are being relived and revealed to us through works of art. So one of the continuous visuals that appear throughout the exhibition are these reoccurring and especially recurring images in the space Texas, which I will talk about, are cut out maps in a variety of different sizes to revive these images of landscapes or people. So imagine very delicate, elaborate X-Acto knife cuttings to unveil these hidden landscapes. They are extremely beautiful. They're
stunning.
Freaking gorgeous. They're essential to the exhibition, and understanding this undertone is about this connection between the internal and external landscape, the connection between the people and queer histories that have literally shaped the landscape that we see today.
Yes.
So in Texas, there are 2 long opposing walls that have, I think, maybe 10 cutout maps.
Yeah.
About max on either side. So probably 20 total. And they highlight the location of where these gay bars used to be in all across the state of Texas. In the middle of the space is a large ephemeral installation and reproduction of chapters or pages out of the book Norma Trist, or Pure Carbon, an Inversion of the Sexes. This book was written in 1895 and published in Texas. This was technically a fiction book, although it reflects the times and was based on a true woman named Alice Mitchell. where its main character, Norma Trist, recounts her crime of passion as she cannot be with or marry her female lover. So she's essentially put on trial in this novel. So these pages are replicated by making stencils of each of the pages and sifting carbon through them onto the paper to reveal the text. So if you were to blow on these works of art or these pages, you would metaphorically and literally have the power to erase this story. So this is a really interesting and old piece of writing that is actually justifying, in a lot of ways, Norma's love. And there's a really powerful part of the story where she's on trial and she's describing her love for this other woman in a way that is so beautifully laid out and detailed that her love couldn't be wrong because it's so pure and so good. So I can see how Nick and Jake would really be fascinated and excited about this book, but not everything about this book is so progressive, as there are racially insensitive descriptions and dialogue about African American and Hispanic characters, which are, of course, not things to celebrate. So this power that we have as viewers, that we hold to be able to erase this part of the story or any part of the story, is up to you. It's up to us. And as artists, Nick and Jake essentially yield this same power, but they choose to not celebrate, but acknowledge the racism in this book. Because if we're going to use an intersectional lens, if this exhibition is going to be about erecting untold American histories and amplify the voices of people that have and continue to be discriminated against, then we need to have a truthful representation of what really happened instead of creating our version of what we wanted to happen, right?
Yeah, and I think, again, that's so poignant to... We are not trying to erase all of history. We should talk about history, but there are ways we can talk about it that's inclusive and progressive. Like, history is not clean, obviously.
And it's not our decision. We don't get to cherry pick what we want and don't want to learn. Like, that's not how it works.
Right.
So this idea of contradicting truth is also seen within the maps of where the Texas gay bars once stood and flanked the walls around this installation. So one of the maps is entitled Where Our Friend Susanna Thought the Ranch Used to Be, and the other is called Where the Ranch Actually Was. And although this is kind of funny, Nick and Jake hold both of those things as true in spirit, even if they aren't necessarily both true in fact, because it speaks to this larger idea of trying to map out an entire history that people and our own history have tried to work so hard to bury.
Yeah, absolutely. So as always, we are going to link all of these incredible people and artworks on our Instagram, on our resources page, on our website. Also check out these different kind of spaces that Nick and Jake are building across the different museums that they build these states in. Each layout, I mean, not changes entirely, but it is, of course, a different environment that they're putting together. And then they also have different states besides the ones that we mentioned here.
Yeah, as I was looking them up, I saw that they were doing, I believe, a virtual project with the Momentary, which is a new space run by Crystal Bridges in Arkansas. So I think there should be some good information on them over there.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
Yeah.
We could only talk about a few people today. It's so hard, but we mentioned Catherine Opie. Check out Felix Gonzalez Torres. Oh my gosh, incredible. Robert Indiana. Those are maybe some of the big names you might know that can kind of easily pull you into more types of queer art, queer engagement, queer theory. Today we wanted to share some hopefully new names to you. Hopefully you learned some new stuff. But again, we'll do a follow train and highlight some more stuff on our Instagram so you can see that.
Alrighty.
And with that,
Happy Pride, everybody.
Happy Pride, everybody. Oh my gosh.
We love you guys so much, and thank you as always for listening.
Yes. All right. We will talk to you on Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.